for gravel, for example, for gravel resource extraction, you typically see them, the operator will say, this is going to be a 30-year operation, but they have to come back every 5 years for a non-public hearing to basically get reevaluated and make sure that they don't have any infractions. So there are things like that we could do and make part of code to make sure that they get part of the approvals for the homeless and transient shelters.
Can we work on that along with this language with review by the Assembly between now and the meeting when we address this in the middle of July?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. I had myself in the queue, and it was to ask why, or have we considered whether or not we would want to move shelters into special land use permit territory instead of conditional use?
I know we've talked about that in the past. There are land use issues that are associated with, obviously any land use. It does seem appropriate that on some level the Planning and Zoning Commission is reviewing it, but we can explore the special permit. We don't have that for any other land use except for alcohol and marijuana, but we can explore that.
Thank you. And then last question on this topic, I do want to move on to alcohol tax discussion, but Mr. Weddleton can be the last one on this one.
Okay, thanks. So this is on the agenda for the Community Economic Development Committee tomorrow as well. And I thought, oh, this will all be redundant, but I don't think it'll be redundant. I think, I don't know, Michelle, if you can attend there, and maybe a lot to do in short time, but to the extent you can is kind of be prepared to address possible amendments to 2020-58 that would get to some of these points, give the Assembly some involvement in the process. And but that would be helpful. And I think before we deal with it in July, we could even have another Community Economic Development Committee meeting that would look at those again. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Okay, we're going to move on to the next item in our agenda because I had slated 45 minutes for it. We're going to have to be a little bit faster than that. This is one of the discussions we want to have about the alcohol tax. Clearly, this is going to be centered around Pillar 3 of Anchored Home, the public health and safety pillar that the municipality is generally in charge of or implements, and it looks like to kick us off, we actually have Mr. Gates with a question.
Hi, sorry, it was on the AO 2020-58 still. I just wanted to ask about the timeliness of this. Well, first, Mr. Weddleton mentioned amendments, and if any members have amendments, please get in touch with me sooner rather than later so we could get them drafted. And then secondly, is this a must pass this Tuesday night, Ms. McNulty, or is there a room to postpone it?
Actually, Mr. Gates, this is not up for public hearing until July 14th. So there is some time.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Who from
Sorry,
the administration? Sure, thank you. Who from the administration is going to kick us off on the alcohol tax discussion?
It's epic silence.
Yeah, it is. Anyone? Okay.
So I don't know who was set to make this presentation, but for my part, if I might, I would speak.
Go for it, Mr. Constant.
So there are a lot of competing interests in the conversation about how we're going to utilize alcohol tax revenues. And I think each department that was asked to spent half of it. And so we've probably spent it 4 times for what we anticipate of revenue. But one of the primary motivations for a number of people who supported this tax was to address the impacts of alcohol in our community, and that in very specific perspective is the issue of homelessness, people in the streets, inebriation, all of that. And the biggest challenge we face going forward is not creating new facilities or buildings, but it's in fact paying for operating funds for these key services that are out there. We previously proposed a spreadsheet that had some context in it about how we might spend the money, and we're ongoing in that conversation. And while those items continue to change, what I hope the members continue to keep in mind is that we need to pay for operating dollars for these very specific programs to get them working to meet this need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Did we have someone on from the library? I know they had a portion of the presentation.
Yes, this is Claire Ross. Should I go ahead?
Yes, please.
All right. This is Claire Ross. I'm the Assistant Director for Strategy and Development of the Anchorage Public Library. And I'm also joined by our Community Resource Coordinator, Rebecca Barker, and our Director, Mary Jo Torgeson, if anyone has questions for them. But we wanted to make a pitch for our Community Resource Coordinator program. It's also known as Social Worker in the Library. It's about 1.5 years old. It's a pilot project funded privately, primarily through the Mental Health Trust Authority. And it's been extremely successful. It's very low budget and efficient. We have a social worker, Rebecca, and we have social worker interns from UAA who are just available at LUSAC Library to help people who are struggling with housing issues, substance issues, mental health. As many of you know, the library, LUSAC Library, is the only public facility in Midtown. So we see a disproportionate number of people who are struggling with these issues. A 2017 survey found that 27% of our patrons at LUSAC are experiencing a complex vulnerability such as homelessness. So we've had a large share of the burden of dealing with this issue and not a lot of support for it. So this Community Resource Coordinator program has been amazing for us. It's really helped reduce the number of incidences that we have at the library, make the library safer for people who are experiencing vulnerabilities so they have a safe place to go, and then helping the library maintain a safe and healthy atmosphere. So at the end of this year, the funding for that program, private funding, will run out, and we strongly feel that the municipality should take on this project for the long term because, like I said, it's very cost effective. It's about $200,000 a year to run this, and we're very effective. Rebecca's met with 500 people in 2019 alone, and she's housed some of our Anchorage's most vulnerable people. She's done 76 coordinated entry assessments in 2019, and she only started in July. And she's met with 295 people for one-on-one meetings to help them with housing. I think one other point about our program is that we see a unique set of people. There are a lot of people in Anchorage who are experiencing homelessness who don't go to shelters and aren't getting existing supports. They're living in their cars or they're couch surfing, or maybe they even have a place to live, but it's very iffy if they can pay the rent each month. And so we're serving people that are not met anywhere else in the community. And we help people who are living on the edge avoid crisis. Rebecca frequently helps people who are about to get evicted with rental assistance and other services like that. We have a white paper that we've sent out. Hopefully you've all seen that with the numbers and some success stories. I think that's all I have to say, so we'll open it up if anyone has questions. It looks like John Weddleton has one.
Yeah, 1 second, please. Claire, can you just introduce yourself one more time? Someone asked who's testifying.
Sure, Sean. This is Claire Ross, and I'm the Assistant Director for the Anchorage Public Library. I oversee strategy and long-term development.
Thanks, Claire. Mr. Weddleton, can you go ahead, please?
Sure, thanks. It makes sense to have services where the people are. But, there is, as you would know, there is a problem because now there are people who won't go to the library because it's full of homeless people. So I wonder, is there a way to have another facility that would include the services you provide that would be preferable and work better? So that instead of having someone in the library, the people who are coming to you now would have another place to go and not be at the library.
Well, we would certainly love more public assistance in Midtown. So if there was a shelter, we would work closely with them, and I think it would alleviate some burden if that's what you're getting at. But I think this program, it doesn't really deal with people in crisis the way a shelter does. We're dealing with everyday people who are, like a lot of the people Rebecca sees. We have one story of a woman, a single working mother who was about to get evicted, and she happened to come to the library to get some books for her kids. And Rebecca's office is next to the youth services area. And so she started a conversation with Rebecca, and Rebecca was able to help her get an appeal for rent, paying her rent, and get assistance so that she didn't have to worry about rent for a couple months while she could work and help with her kids. So there are a lot of other people who aren't quite in that crisis stage that the library is able to help. So I think both are needed.
This is Mary Jo. I'd like to add one more thing to that. And that is, people are going to come whether there's a social worker or not. The reason why we got a social worker is for the exact reason. They come like other people. They come to read newspapers, but they also come because we allow them to be there as long as they want. We don't look down our nose, and we treat them with respect.
Good, thank you.
Okay, next we have Mr. Constant, please.
Thank you. Just on the point Mary Jo just made, libraries have a long history of being the place in the community where everybody goes because it's an open door when all other doors are shut. And so there really is no other alternative than the public library in modern American history. Claire, your $200,000 proposal here, it's cropped up in a few different locations, or do you have multiple proposals? Is this the only one you've discussed?
We have one proposal, and we were shopping it around to anyone who will listen to us because we think it's really important and we don't want a gap in service, but there's only one proposal.
Right, so I'd seen it framed as an early reading program somewhere.
Oh, I think there is confusion. We're also working to launch an early literacy outreach coordinator next year as well. That's separate from this.
Okay, so that is a separate deal. So we aren't going to be discussing this item in the Health Policy Committee. I think Ms. Quinn Davidson is in the queue to talk about that. Okay, and I'm strongly supportive of this project. It makes total sense. I was surprised how low cost it is.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Constant. Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, Chris, I can speak to that briefly, to the two proposals we received from Mary Jo and from Claire. So there's this one and then the early literacy. We're going to find a way to discuss that, I think, in our July meeting. Natasha and Suzanne are meeting, and I are meeting today to talk about the way we'll have that meeting flow. I am strongly in support of both programs. Like Chris was thinking that it's actually quite low for what we achieve. I've been impressed with is it community resource officer? I can't remember what you're calling it, but the person in the library, how much you've achieved. And we talked about it a year ago. I'm sort of floored at the relatively low investment for the results. And I also just want to say thanks to Claire and Mary Jo. I think they're both visionaries in our community who want to transform the kind of services we provide and how we're reaching people. And Mary Jo's points are just so right on. I mean, the library is where we reach people. And if we want to expand what we're doing and connect with new people and provide services, we need to be where people are. And I'm devastated to learn that Mary Jo is retiring. Anyway, thank you all. And I'm strong support of this, or even more potentially.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn Davidson. I have a question before I turn to Mr. Dunbar for his question after we finish this conversation. Does this proposal contemplate placing an individual also in the other branches of the library, or just the LUSAC?
Yes, it would be for the community resource coordinator would primarily serve LUSAC and oversee the program, and then there would be an assistant who would serve the Mountain View Library. That's where our second highest need is. We'd love to have another assistant who could serve Muldoon, because while Muldoon Library doesn't have people quite in crisis, they do have a lot of people who are struggling with job searches and housing that could use this assistance as well.
Thank you for that. Is it possible for you to get us a little bit of updated information about what the cost of that additional expansion would look like?
Yeah, it would be about $95,000 more. That's the cost of an assistant community resource coordinator. So I can add that to my proposal.
Great, thank you. Mr. Constant, on this topic, please.
Thanks. I just wanted to make a note. We've heard lots of talk in the last several weeks about changing our investment practices. Some people suggest that we've spent too much on police because other national areas have policing concerns where we have some that are different. And I just want to state for the record here clearly and unequivocally that we have been working on making additional investments outside of the police that will address most, if not all, of the impacts we continue to hear about. And so I'm really proud of the work this assembly has been doing long before the last month in contemplating how we ramp up the robust services that will eliminate the need for more restrictive levels of any kind of government intervention. So this is one example of a really, really good proposal that does decompress or depressurize other elements of our system that are overtaxed. And so the more thinking we can do along these lines, the better we serve every level of our community.
This is Claire. I forgot to say this at the beginning, but I did want to thank all of you on the Assembly for even allowing us into this discussion. I completely agree with Christopher that you all are visionaries and looking at things from different angles, and you've all been very supportive of our project all along. So I did want to acknowledge that and thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us today and being a part of this presentation. I think it's a critical piece of what we discussed in this particular pillar around public health and safety. Mr. Dunbar, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess before Claire goes, I just want to echo what Ms. Quinn Davidson and Mr. Constant said. I am very supportive of these kind of efforts at the library, and I hope that we can find, one of the many line items that will be in this eventual funding package from the alcohol tax. I hope that it includes this program at the library. I had been having a conversation with someone, and I apologize, I'm not sure if he's online or not, but insofar as this is kind of an open forum where people can talk about ideas related to homelessness and alcohol tax funding, I have been in communication with Sean Sullivan from Rural Cap, and I just wanted to see, I think he's been reaching out to some other folks as well, talking about outreach programs as a potential place where we could make an investment. And I was wondering if he was online, and if he was, maybe he could be given a chance to speak.
Yes, I am definitely online here. Thank you for giving me the floor, Forrest. I wanted to check to see, is Rob Marks from Rural Cap in here as well?
So I can't give you the floor. Ms. Zalatel, the floor. I'm sorry. I'm just asking Ms. Zalatel if that's okay.
Yes, briefly, because this is pillar 3, so this is geared toward direct municipal services, and we will be taking up the remaining pillars of Anchored Home next month as well. So briefly, and then we can make sure Mr. Sullivan is invited back next month as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Please go ahead, Mr. Sullivan.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I was just wondering, is my supervisor Rob Marks in here as well too? Okay, well maybe not. So I've been working with Rural Cap to come up with an initiative for street outreach. We know that there's a huge demand right now for street outreach, and this is something that I've been doing closely for the past 5 years. So we've created an initiative that we're going to be proposing, that we've already submitted, to try to assist with the outreach and actually having people out in the streets hands-on. There's a lot of different things in this program that we wanted to bring to fruition, but predominantly what we want to do is we want to help the service providers reach their destination, because we know that sometimes there can be a gap in between the services providers and what it actually takes for these individuals to get into the housing. One of the most crucial parts about housing people and the homeless people we see on the streets is the document collections. A lot of these people don't have the necessary paperwork and certifications and things that they need to qualify for them. And that's one of the things I think would be a very strong initiative as it pertains to outreach when we get to that bridge of where we're going to be transitioning a lot of these people from the Sullivan Arena. We want to try to work and get them ready in preparation to get into housing with a lot of the loopholes and some of the things that are frustrating for service providers and getting them in.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Yeah, I'll make sure that you are a part of the continuing conversation. I know that this body has been very interested in outreach and recently put out or made an appropriation, and that an RFP for outreach was issued by the Department of Health. So I thank you for joining us today. Mr. Constant looks like he has a question for you.
Sure.
Did I hear you, Mr. Sullivan, suggest that you, RoCap, applied for the outreach funding that we put out there?
Yes, I think if I'm not mistaken, yes, we did, sir.
Well, that's good news that you applied. And so in the context of the alcohol tax money, before that, we've already appropriated money for this, and I don't see it going away because most of us would argue that it is a critical element to the effort to house the individuals living in our public spaces. And I would offer a suggestion to you as an applicant, if you didn't build it into your proposal, that you reach out to the Homeless Resource Advisory Council and fold them into your work, because I believe that they do offer a perspective that is unique and emerging and could be very helpful to any successful applicant. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you, Mr. Constantine.
And then we have a note in the chat, which I'll read because we want to make sure it's part of the record, from Nicole Lebo with the Health Department. Yes, RoCap was one of 4 applicants. The scoring meeting directly follows this meeting. So it looks like those proposals are set for evaluation. So does anyone else from the administration have anything they would like to talk about or discuss with the members of this committee about alcohol tax as it relates to public health and safety as we consider any appropriations around homelessness? Last call.
Assembly Member Zalatel, this is Jason Bockenstead. The administration doesn't have anything to add at this point. We are obviously been participating in a lot of the meetings that the Assembly has been having around this, and we've been having conversations about what does, the 3 buckets look like. I don't think we've settled on anything yet, but we're definitely willing to consider any proposals that folks have and how that would potentially work into all of the 3 distinct buckets that we have, and what we can do to make that a reality.
Thank you, Mr. Bockenstead. So I'm going to ask a question to clarify. So is it that the administration doesn't have a specific request or proposal that they wish to put forward with regard to the work under Pillar 3 of Anchored Home with regard to alcohol tax funds?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say right now we are still having a lot of conversations with the community about what they want to see, just as the Assembly is. And I don't think we've settled on any particular program or item yet within those structures. I think we're still having those types of conversations. I think we're open to it. We just would want to see what that is.
Thank you, Mr. Bockenstead. If members have anything else that they would like to discuss or any more questions with regard to this pillar of the alcohol tax, our pillar of Anchored Home as it relates to alcohol tax, now is the time. In July, we will be taking up the remaining pillars, which are the pillars that we generally address through partnership. And what our partners are requesting to do their work with regard to alcohol tax funds. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. So we will turn now to committee legislative and budget priorities. Really today, I mean, the budget priority was to discuss specifically about the alcohol tax. We are also, as everyone's well aware, discussing CARES Act funding right now. So I guess I would open it up for any comments or discussions if there are issues related to homelessness and the continuum of care around CARES Act funding, or anything we would like to discuss as we start to move into the 2021 budget conversation. Okay, again, I'm seeing no one. So any legislative priorities or discussion anyone would like to talk about? Okay, we will move on in the agenda then to audience participation. I'm going to get back in touch here with Mr. Begich. And then I have two others who had requested early audience participation, so they'll go next, and then we'll see what else we have open in terms of time for the floor. Again, I remind you, please keep your comments directed towards the chair, and you'd have 3 minutes. Mr. Begich, are you on the line?
I am, thank you.
Okay, you may begin.
Yes, I appreciate the opportunity, Madam Chairman, and members of the Assembly Subcommittee on Homelessness. And just something that we've been trying to do, and I've presented in front of you folks before, and I would just like to turn your attention again to our proposal, intervention2020.com, that Dave Cuddy and I put together. And really, I know I didn't hear anyone comment on your legislative priorities, but what we've been asking for is a conversation between the city of Anchorage and the state of Alaska, which is kind of a legislative priority. And we've been working with Chris Tuck and Representative Kopp from the House, my brother Tom in the Senate, in trying to gain a conversation that involves more of the municipal assembly members. And Member Kennedy has agreed to attend a meeting that's upcoming, and I'd like her to share that after the meeting with her colleagues, because we'd really like to involve, because the dialogue does involve the state. We've made a suggestion that involves state resources and city resources, but it requires leadership, and the leadership is not coming from the mayor's office at the present time. And you guys are the deliberative body on appropriation, and we'd really like to see that. And there's nothing to respond to from the administration in terms of the tax proposal, which is unfortunate. And I hope there's another hearing so people can. But in the interim, we would really like you to look at intervention2020.com, take a look at what we're suggesting, get in touch with Chris Tuck or Representative Kopp, and get involved in the legislative side of this directly, because the conversation should involve both bodies. We have a lot of people from rural areas here that are coming in. That makes it a statewide issue. A lot of the programs that are operating are interesting and useful, but where we really think that the thing needs to go is towards the criminality that's taking place in Anchorage. And a lot of that is driven by the underlying issues of mental illness, alcoholism, and drug addiction. We understand that. But the camper idea is not a good narrative for what we're really seeing in the decay of Anchorage. And that's what we're concerned about. And I think this is not a liberal or a conservative issue. It's about justice. It's about administering the law. I just got billed for police and fire in my tax bill. And I'm being told that you're not going to enforce the law. That's kind of a fraud. I got billed for Parks and Rec, but I can't send my grandkids out there safely. That's a fraud. You're billing me for things I cannot use. You have laws on the books that you have no intention of enforcing. So either remove the laws and let the state enforce theirs, or have a conversation that deals with the criminality in a broader sense, because homelessness is a symptom of many other things that are not being addressed. And thank you very much for giving me this few moments.
Thank you, Mr. Begich. Okay. I had Karen, who had asked to testify. Karen, are you on the line?
Can you hear me?
Yes, there you are. You have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
I agree with Mr. Begich's comments that we are not dealing with the root of the problem and the symptoms of the problem. I also would like to comment on the idea of pushing a zoning change through without following the usual process. I think that's a dangerous precedent to set. Just using this emergency pandemic as an excuse to do that sets us up for future changes that also circumvent the system. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen, for the record, could you give us your last name as well?
Peterson.
Thank you. All right, next up we have Jim. And Jim, are you on the line? Jim Morrison, sorry. Jim Morrison? *6 to unmute if you're on the phone. Okay. And then lastly, in the line of people who got in touch ahead of time is Dave Cuddy. Are you on the line?
Come on, David. Don't let us down now. You got your 3 minutes.
Okay. All right. So at this point, is there anyone else who would wish to provide audience participation to the committee? And what I would suggest you do, because we do have a lot of participants, is just state your name and we'll see if make sure nobody talks over each other the best we can.
Barbara Rigmer.
Okay, Barbara, go ahead. 3 minutes.
Hi, I haven't prepared testimony, but I am listening closely, and I want to thank Mr. Begich so much for his comments, and I concur completely. I purchased a home in North Star subdivision 3.5 years ago. I've written to you several times about my troubles with the neighborhood. It is a completely untenable situation in North Star. As I've described to you before, I have had 3 home sales fall through on my home. I've been trying to sell it for a year. I finally got a contract, but I am conceding a huge amount of money to try and get my home sold. I'm losing between $55,000 and $95,000 in equity on this home sale, and it's due to the neighborhood that we are living in. I moved here 3.5 years ago, and it was not a bad neighborhood, and all we're hearing now is buyers being frightened away by the homeless in the camps near our home by Chester Creek Trail. And my neighbors are having the same difficulty. Many of them have had their homes for sale for months and months, some of them for years. They are now realizing that they are in the same boat as we are. I'm selling my home for well below the tax assessment. I am planning to pursue legal action against the city. I can't take a loss of this kind of money on my home. It's my retirement savings. And I beseech you to please go through the public process on citing this next homelessness facility. Midtown has been impacted to a degree that we can't tolerate it anymore. And I would please also beg you to work with the state on finding real solutions and not just keep doing the same thing over and over again every year with basically no effective results. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I actually think it's really important that we move on to agenda item number 7, which is committee discussion. If you could all please mute if you're not speaking. And to kick off committee discussion, Mr. Weddleton.
Oh, a brief comment. It's Nick Begich and others, is work with the state. And it's interesting that over the 4 years I've been on the assembly, we've pretty much given up on any state help on this. And I think the expectation is typically the state would be handling mental illness and addiction recovery and so on. But the complete neglect of that by the state has made us look inward. But separate issue, I think everyone on the assembly knows we've been getting a bunch of emails that are kind of conflating the AO 2020-58, and apparently there's some plans with Golden Lion, which I have no knowledge of whatsoever. And I wonder, is there someone there who could talk about that and just to help us out to respond to the number of emails that we're getting on that?
Thank you, Mr. Welton. Mr. Bockenstead or Ms. Ward, are you on the line? And could you speak to that, please?
I can certainly, if Robin is not on the line. Doesn't sound like she is, so I guess I'm on deck. So yes, there as part of the process that we've been going through and looking at how are we going to use CARES Act money that is going to be coming to the municipality and make a real substantive change in how we handle homelessness and treatment issues within the municipality. We have explored the possibility, as we have said publicly a number of times over the last couple of months, looking at purchasing a number of properties. The Golden Lion is one of them, and we are looking at that as a potential treatment center to provide the very needed extra treatment within the municipality. So those are proposals that will be coming forward to the assembly in the coming days, and we'll be debating them over the course of the next month prior to the July 14th meeting. So more details will be coming in a proposed ordinance in AM.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bockenstead. Mr. Constant.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton's comments are well made, that the state has now for the better part of 20 years receded from its commitment to address the problems that have been foisted on Anchorage from all parts of the state. Where I differ from Mr. Begich and the kind of very easy to agree with sweet argument that we just need to enforce the laws, that's the answer, relies on a heavy-handed approach that is a criminalization of being and putting people in jail. And we don't have jails in the municipality of Anchorage. The state of Alaska does. And an argument to fill up the Palmer Correctional Facility and make it a work farm isn't us, which is kind of underlying a lot of the proposal that they have been pushing on, which is find a big place and force them all to be locked up. There's no mechanism under the state constitution to lock people up against their will. And so I find it regrettable that we continue to hear the drumbeat that what we need to do is just enforce the law, when we're in a conundrum here that the only way through this is to find a process that is agreeable to the individual, except in rare occasions when the courts do grant the right to take somebody's freedom from them. And so any conversation that is based on the taking of people's freedoms, even though it costs us that those people exercise their freedoms by being in our parks, and I'm strongly supportive of coming up with solutions on that domain, we have to do it in a way that is legal, constitutional, and doesn't rely on just locking them all up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Anyone else for committee discussion? I will let you know I've received a few messages. Folks who were trying to testify earlier, when they would unmute their phones, they would get remuted. So I'm going to, if there's no objection, circle back to one person who did reach out who couldn't seem to get into the participation. Have time. Okay. Stephanie Rhodes, are you able to unmute? *6. Ms. Rhodes, are you able to get on?
Can the meeting director unmute her phone?
Members Alatel, this is Jennifer. We can't unmute Ms. Rhodes from our end. She has to do it by hitting *6.
Hi, this is Terry, right?
Okay, so apparently *6 is not working for her. So I apologize that's not working. And we'll have to see what we can do about that. Maybe I'm hoping we'll be back to meeting in person here soon. Apologize that's not working. Terry, yeah, you may go ahead for 3 minutes, and then we'll probably be close to concluding the meeting.
Hi, I just want to thank the Assembly for having this discussion. Thank you, Christopher Constant, for mentioning the whole idea of reconfiguring our zoning laws. There is so much that needs to be readdressed about how we do business, how we consider what we value. And I feel it's unfortunate that people live in neighborhoods where they're feeling a fear of houseless people. Because I have been among the houseless, and I have talked to many, many houseless people. And a friendly face is how you introduce yourself to someone who's houseless. Offer somebody coffee at the beginning conversation space. To help undo crime, then you have to go and undo this idea of creating the other. And right now we have a system that is quite a bit geared toward people who have property, geared toward people who have money, people who have education, and generally more this idea if you have a white skin and all those things that you have a lot of privilege in our situation. However, what is built in America are a lot of other people who don't have those same powers of expressing their voice. And I suggest we really come to a place of dialogue between the different parties. Why aren't the cities setting up conversations between housed and unhoused people? Why aren't we having situations where people who live in housing, who don't live in housing, understand the utilities, understand our park services, understand the laws that we have around zoning, so we can have a rich conversation about how to solve this problem. I really commend the support of the libraries, and I support, and thank you for mentioning HRAC being involved with Rural Cap. I feel like Rural Cap is a very good, savvy leader in how to undo houselessness. I would love to see them have more voice in the process. And as we move forward, let's consider that maybe what we have been doing for the last 100 years, what makes up a municipality, is so out of balance with what we actually need to do for living people and helping to heal our communities, helping healing houseless people, helping healing the racism in our community, help us to heal the classism in our community, and create real dialogue among people who are equal under the sights of God and all those the creator of any religion that people tend to. It's up to each of us to be brave. It's up to each of us to have faith in healing and not attacking our neighborhood because we don't understand our neighbor. So thank you for giving me this piece of time. Any questions?
I don't see questions for you, Terry. Thank you for your testimony. Okay, with that, that concludes our agenda for today. And I welcome a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you all. Have a good day.